My Master's Sandals, Chapter 20. With Don Joaquin Balagu as President of the Dominican Republic, the 90s were full of political conflicts. My situation had not changed much, and I was still looking for ways to restart my work that allowed me to work to develop as a human being. After everything that happened in my mother's house, the stay not very comfortable. Day after day, I desperately struggled with the misfortune and scarcity. I wanted to be able to leave the environment where I did not feel well. In the nights were the silence of my best opportunity to think. Very clear and a deep image came to my mind. I dreamed of immigrating from my country, taking the opportunity in the United States. These thoughts began to grow with more and more eagerness. They were presented to me several times, and it seemed like something that was a grand opportunity. One night I had the experience of what we could call an astral journey. This type of incident had happened to me before, but I was conscious this time without being asleep. I saw the city of New York with every precise detail and could describe it perfectly, even though my body had never been there. I saw a job in a very luxurious place with many lights. This would be my next destination. I had full assurance that I would be in those places that were part of my vision at some point in my life. The very vivid images, immersed buildings that surrounded the city were present. I was walking among them easily and full of joy. I felt familiar with the streets and avenues as if I had been passing those roads every day. The sensation of feeling present in a world that only my mind knew increased my interest in making it an extensive in my reality. The idea of traveling to American soil became a new challenge for which I almost lost my life. This brought me to Yola, a small, cheap wooden boat, which is widely used by fishermen due to its versatility. It is also well known in the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico for transporting people who move to the United States. The trip from DR to the United States had a history of many deaths and disappearances. Its informal nature is not prepared by direct navigation, withstanding the waves fiercely. My hope was being able to achieve my dreams and find a better future meant risking this. However, I had to find a way to achieve them. Until then, I only knew about the risk from various comments of people who made the clandestine trip. The authorities were very attentive to carrying out interventions. This was a very high percentage of people who wanted to change their lives and circumstances by traveling to the United States, even though there was no safe method. People were so desperate they found it worth taking the risk of dying just to attempt to live a different life. It inflicted travel business grew very large. I spent days looking for someone to take me to the United States. This was very hard to find, and it made me feel hopeless and miserable with where I was at. I didn't understand everything was happening the way it's supposed to be, and that at the best timing. Indeed, I became very frustrated and caused myself to go through another terrible segment of my life, trying to force my way into the vision and travel experience I had seen. I was walking with much reluctance and concerns on San Vicente de Paul Avenue in the Dominican Republic. The street was bustling and full of commercial business. For a moment, everything clouded me and I just wanted to take my life. My intentions to throw myself into a vehicle to end it was all clear. All of a sudden, the voice appeared saying, "Things are going to change. You don't have to do this. A car was approaching and I tried to move my legs to launch myself, but I felt them static and was unable to move them. I watched as the cars continued to pass, unable to carry out my intentions. I gave up my sudden plan, and the only alternative in those moments was to sit on the sidewalk to think for long hours. Traveling across the ocean became the only resource to get out of this crisis. I could not find another solution in my life. The idea became solidified. I decided to contact those who would take me to the United States as soon as possible. I didn't see that I had much to lose. I had already tried to take my own life, so if I lost it along the way, it would be of no consequences. However, the voice was right, and it always was, and there was something about my life changing for the better. I held on to as my last hope. It was tough to travel because these businessmen were against the law. The police were like vultures, always on the lookout for this. So I had to travel. So how to travel was never posted publicly. I managed to make my inquiries privately. It was very difficult for me because nobody wanted to say anything. The information I was able to gather was not very specific. The only information I collected indicated that the trip had a cost of $2,000 to $3,000 American dollars, a figure far beyond my reach, almost impossible. My hope remained intact, and I kept trying to find a better way to achieve my goal. In the Dominican Republic, many things were done informally to make money and make ends meet. One afternoon, I went to a patio of a private house that served as a gym. There were a few weights made of concrete, wooden planks, iron bars. They were used to build abs and for different exercises. The gym occupied a quiet and generous space of this house. It was for people who wanted to keep in good physical shape. I was wanting for some weights to be available, as they were all being used at the time. Two boys were talking about clandestine travel, which exercising. Unaware of my close presence, I stood to one side and listened for a little bit more because it was just what I was looking for. Finishing the lifting session, one of them left, and I took the opportunity to approach the remaining boy with great discretion. I commented on his need to board a boat. After listening to me for a few seconds, he hesitated a little and then asked me if I was interested. When I answered yes, he told me that he wanted to travel, but he didn't have all the money they needed to do so. I was honest with them, and I was only interested in getting information because I didn't have that large amount either. After a few moments, he told me a lot more. I would accept any proposal to fulfill my purpose. We walked together and continued with the subject with a little more confidence. Augusto ended up telling me about his situation, which was also very sad and full of ups and downs. Finally, after telling me some more detail, I ended up confessing my lack of money. The eagerness and the desires we both had to get ahead in our lives, looking for a better horizon, led us to getting along quickly. This started a good friendship. We went to the town of La Ramona where there were organizers of the clandestine trips lived. It took us a long time to get there, but we didn't give up. At first, mistrust was a real stumbling block. After managing to talk to this man, no argument of ours was credible to him. At first, he thought we were just undercover police. We had to create new ideas and tried to convince him. The instance was much more of that in the end. We succeeded by telling him that we did not have money to pay and that all we were looking for was to leave the country. We both told him about our lives, the scarcity of the many essential things you need to live, the lack of work, the country's problems, etc. He agreed to give us an opportunity with conditions that we had to meet if we wanted to achieve the dream of traveling. The man proposed that we eliminate the issue of lack of money and recommended 10 more people to him. They were very difficult to achieve because at the moment you might be talking to an undercover cop or somebody else who would turn you in for spreading the word. We got very discouraged because our mouths over the months we had not even managed to convince 2 people. 2 were far from the 10 we needed. Having seen this constantly looking for the long-awaited trip, the man was convinced of our need and offered us another option to take. The only thing was that the option carried even a greater risk than the previous one. We had to take a boat used for crossing known as Loyola. It implied sleeping in the mountains and making sure nobody stole it. Fear took a hold of us, and we presented daily with several people who had the same desire as us. Without much thought, we accepted it and headed towards the center of the forest near the seashore. We found a group of people working, accessing the boat. We tried to be friendly, but nobody cared much. Little by little, we were entering a world full of permanent danger. The mafia was present and dominated the entire country. And at any moment, we could have been exchanged our time and desire with life itself. We began to get to know the area and never left, keeping it our work. Our work was taking care of the boat began at night, when the risk of being attacked by people living in the area increased greatly. After a few weeks of staying in that place, the water reserve ran out. The unbearable heat that was forcing us to consume it frequently. We did not correctly calculate our supply from the beginning. Sitting next to my friend, we thought that we could go out to the nearest town to get some. We would have to risk something happening to the boat, and our dreams of the trip would vanish if it did. The idea of enduring our thirst was better for the time being, but did not last long. The voice appeared when I walked towards the sea, and my mind created ideas that were impossible to carry out. You can supply yourself with seawater and turn it into drinking water if you follow a straightforward method. I was quietly listening. With a piece of cloth, join 2 plastic bottles that you used, connecting them mouth to mouth. Fill one with the seawater and the other one empty. The truth seemed very difficult to me at the time, but I continued to pay attention. By leaving both bottles exposed to the sun, and with the passing of the hours, condensation will take place. This will eliminate the salt, keeping it from the cloth and one bottle, leaving fresh water in the other for you to drink. Patiently, I finished listening to it. However, it seemed to be a product of my imagination as many times, and I ignored the voice's suggestions. I turned to the area to continue carrying out my work with a gusto. The days passed and our thirst increasingly punishing. The heat was around 110 degrees. Food was scarce and the lack of both started to affect our health. What we have been able to gather to survive is not enough. We endured the last night at dawn. I saw a gusto, shadows, strange, dark circles, and did not wake up. I decided to build an experiment that the voice had suggested. There was no option left at this point. I looked at the bottles that we had used, ripped open one side and leg of my pants I was wearing, and joined them just as the voice had indicated. I placed the experiment in such a way that it was exposed to the sun's rays. I waited 4 or 5 hours without touching it. I hid it in the shade of a tree that had a few branches. My skin was erosion caused by the sunlight, and my system, like my friend's, was frail. When Augusto, who had looked very tired and weak, woke up, he got up to go to see. I observed the experiment and asked him what I was doing. When I told him, he only commented, "A few weeks here and we're already going crazy." Without a doubt, I did not answer him. It was that then the voice appeared saying, "You can recheck it now. Make sure you have the hole in the ground to bury the bottle to make the condensation turn to water again." With my hands, I dug a hole and went to search for the bottles, bury them, and the voice explained to me. To my surprise, I saw one of them was empty and the other looked as if it had a stream of mist. I took both and returned to the place in the hole I had made. On my way, I heard the voice again. Let me sit for a couple more hours. I did not have to watch, but could tell that the sun's location had much time had passed. My impatience won me over, along with my thirst. I asked the voice twice if I could drink the water, but it answered, "Still wait a little longer." Augusto had fallen asleep, and it was better that way because his questions were not helpful and were very judgmental. Finally, on time, I took out the bottles were slowly, and I had hoped that the process was completed and successful. The lack of liquid in our system was causing a lot of damage to our health. I raised the bottles very calmly and felt a positive inside, and to my great surprise, one had appeared with the vapor now had a little water in it. I tried to sip and just wet my lips, and the divine taste of fresh water transported down my throat. I was met with a beautiful feeling of joy, making my eyes clouded by overflowing emotions I experienced. The peace filled me because of having the liquid element that could allow us to survive. The people who worked building the Yola were supposed to return to us, bring us food and water, but they never came. I was grateful for the method of producing fresh water from salt water. Food was the first thing we ran out of. I looked around sometimes to get their fruits. Still, this has only had some dry branches from the heat. The workers eventually appeared in a van. However, they did not bring food and water as promised. We stayed weak and even after more days without nourishment. They did not care about our situation. They took the time to build with materials without paying attention to us. This continued their work on La Yola. As the minutes passed, we decided to approach and ask about our food when we heard some alert cries. "Run, run, the police are coming." People returned to the vehicle while Augusto and I started to flee. Almost dead from the weakness, we attempted to run without looking back. We went out to the wagon. Using the sea as a reference, we began to signal to each vehicle to pick us up. Not many people drove by there. It was a deserted area. It was a deserted area. Someone finally pitied us, and we continued our transportation. We arrived safely in the city after 2 more separate drivers had helped us out. I said goodbye to my friend Augusto, telling him we would meet again to fulfill our goal. It was then that I went to my mother's house and ate, and then rested for endless hours due to extreme fatigue. After a reasonable time, I met Augusto and returned to the forest. With great caution, we headed to the place that the initial organizer had assigned us to take the boat. The people we found were working as if nothing had ever happened. Without speaking much, we went, and we did not go back to our place. We stayed waiting for them to finish to continue taking care of the boat. It was normal for almost no one to speak. Communication was done by 2 people or 3 people only. They were the people in charge, and the rest were just there to do their work. We learned to be cautious and stay away from the group. Augusto and I decided that ourselves to our assignment only. Everything seemed under control until one night in the hostile climate where we were living, I heard in the distance another scream. Run, run, the police are coming. Without delay, the people around us fled the area, going in all directions. Augusto and I started running, but after a few minutes, we realized that we were heading for the military commandos that had surrounded the perimeter. We immediately hid in the weed that we could all cover us in the best possible way. We spent the whole night very scared, without moving, almost without saying a word, hoping to be entirely sure that the military would leave the area. The minutes were endless. We heard shots very close to us. There was no guarantee for our safety. We were breaking the law. I thought about my father. If they killed me, he would have to find me. It was difficult for us to rest even a little. In the morning, we left slowly. After observing the cleared area, we walked along the edge about 15 kilometers. We needed to get out on the road. Enduring, the residents didn't think we were part of the traffickers. A few weeks after that, Augusto and I returned to the place. It seemed unrecognizable. We found nothing of what had left, including the boat. We decided to work in search of the organizer, the man who had set all this in motion for us and was promising us a boat ride to America. Arriving at the house he occupied, we were attended by another person. There were more people inside who were strangers to us. We asked quickly where the man we were looking for was. They told us the man did not live there. We walked away without wanting to know anything more, left only to assure what had happened. We changed our route towards the road. Still on the way, we met 2 acquaintances who informed us that the man traveled with many people. Loyola was sunk without reaching its destination. Everyone, including the organizer, had died. We continued on our way, but some of the residents linked to the illegal business once again looked at us with suspicion eye as we arrived in town. We accelerated our pace. We felt very fearful. Then they were concerned us that they did not let us move forward. The death threats and interrogation both began to create anxiety. Any word of ours was not taken truthful. The fear of losing our lives increased. We were in genuine danger. As the moments I heard the voice saying, "Don't say anything, stay calm. Don't speak anything." When the communication ended, the police siren began to be heard in the distance. The people who were cornered us began to spread out, leaving the place. Augusto and I stood breathing with a bitter relief from what had been experienced. Everything seemed to end with the arrival of the police patrol. They interrogated us about the group of people, indicating the travel illegally. We denied knowing anything about this. However, they didn't believe us. We were detained and taken to the police station like common criminals linked to the mafia. We had detained for 3 weeks. For 2 of those weeks, we were interrogated relentlessly about clandestine travel. We never spoke the truth. We denied knowing that the people and places where illegal businesses were carried out. The last week we were separated. The police were tortured to force some information out, leading me to a hole similar to a septic tank. The water in the tank was running around my nose. For 3 days I kept me standing there, using this punishment as a mean to make me speak. They couldn't get a word of me. The voice was present and constant interaction kept me alive, but asleep without feeling the time. On the 4th day, they took me out. I was almost dead. Without any reaction, they took me back to prison where I woke up. On the 5th day, I was transferred to another police station where I found Augusto. We were finally being released because they were not able to obtain any information from us. The experience was quite devastating. I did not think to insist on traveling like this again. Although I knew that I had seen during the interactions with the voice and my astral travel, I decided just to let everything be and not try to find some way on my own to get there. Going to New York City would have remain a dream for now. The voice told me to stop trying also. Augusto and I had stopped seeing each other. I had given up on traveling in this manner. Some months passed and I tried to recreate my life. One afternoon, the name Augusto came to my memory. When I thought about him, the voice very softly appeared, saying, Augusto is in a better place. You will understand it in time. The phrase was very fresh in my memory, and I kept thinking clearly, referring to a terrible situation. So I went to the neighborhood where I lived. Indeed, the first thing I found out that the Augusto had not stopped insisting on travel. He never gave up on it. My friend had drowned in the attempt. Loyola was shipwrecked, and there he lost his life. Many people who ended their dreams in crossing. Then I understood what the voice was referring to. I was outraged at the voice and yelled at it through my thoughts. Why? If you are everything, don't stop this from happening. The voice replied, in time, you will understand who you are and who you have been talking to your whole life. I was bewildered and hurt. I was harrowing situation. In my anger, I did not listen to the voice and I replied, I don't want you to ever speak to me. I don't want to listen to you. Don't appear in my thoughts or in any way ever again. I found that the voice did not answer me. The loss of my friend kept me locked in a steep sadness. My dreams were left behind. I did not know much to carry out again, and my desires were fading with the help of my frustrations. I talked about it and I tried not to think about it. The friendship and everything I went through with Augusto only made me feel sadder. Maybe it would be better to die together and that I would not have to feel the aftermath of his death. I never had many friends in my youth. A few people related to me, usually adults. I appreciate the highly valued friendship. That was why it was such a big deal when I found a young man like Augusto who had been through so many similar things as me and understood me. We both had dreams, yet suffered from poverty, hunger, and abuse. The loss of his life was like me losing mine. The voice did not appear during this stage. Perhaps I was told it was unwanted. It was difficult for me to recover from the depression in which I had become involved. It took a while, but I came out. I always found a way through everything, forever overcoming the worst of any situation. My Master Sandals, Chapter 21. Now it was a contrasting experience to remember my life, Puerto Plata. I remembered living a far more comfortable life with fewer needs, fewer responsibilities, and downplaying the value of money. What I lived with was constant desperation. I needed to find a way out. The little I earned was only to pay the rent. I had no trouble deciding to go back to Puerto Plata. It seemed like an obvious decision at the time, with how limited my options were. Once settled in, my father, who returned with me, offered to work together on some electricity contracts. I accepted his offer because he had the same need as me. We toured several towns for several months. Emotionally, I was not satisfied with having to return again to continue what I had did during a whole stage prior. The life I lived in Puerto Plata was undoubtedly deeply marked all my expectations as a human being. I had become a day laborer again, and I was filled with emptiness and total uncertainty. This job together did not last very long. My father introduced me to a company that needed the services of an electrician that offered me a little more money than I earned from our share work, so I decided to accept them. I compared my current life to what I had lived before that did not allow me to find tranquility, but instead made it worse. Each day I had an extreme heaviness, knowing that I would dedicate my time and tasks that would lead me to nothing all over again. Maybe if that were my goal, to be an electrician and never work to get ahead, I would demonstrate my skill and everything I learned with my father. However, nothing took the high price for the experience of living in Puerto Plata. A few months later, I resigned, knowing that I would be left with nothing. Looking for a mental break to appease the extreme craving that destroyed me daily. I was urgent to find myself. I returned to the only place that filled me with inner peace, the caves of the three eyes. I wrapped myself up in reading. It was the only thing that satisfied me eternally. Over time, this time away caused me havoc, nerves, and bad thoughts. There were those of the many books I've read. The Greatest Miracle in the World, Og Mandino. The Greatest Salesman in the World, Og Mandino. Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. The Tragedy of Animal Magnetism by Charles Johnson. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. My Enormous Zones by Wayne Dwyer. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Even though I took refuge and I was deep in a search for peace, I still woke up in the sea of confusion that led me to another attempt to take my life. I stood on the edge of the road with not much traffic. This was near Los Tres Rojos. I was watching the passing of a few cars that were quickly crossing the street. Again, negative thoughts took me over, and my desire to launch myself to the end of my existence took hold. My outrage with the voice was also a large part of what disturbed me. I had an uncomfortable posture with myself, but still I could not take my life. One afternoon, I had begun talking to a neighbor. I asked if he would serve as a reference for a job. Between his comments, he said he knew a person who worked at the Sheraton Hotel. This interested me. I asked him to serve as a reference for the job opportunity there, and he answered affirmatively. Despite the positive outlook with a potential job opportunity, I still had to wait 2 more weeks, living a miserable life daily. The useless routine was choking me, and I was so lost in depression. One afternoon, I finally returned home and had a hopeful answer. I would speak to my neighbor again. He told me that the director hotel of security, his friend, was ready to receive me for an interview. I felt the sky reopen. showing me a light that could illuminate my many days of darkness. I was pleased with the news, but with the concern that started to worry me. However, at this stage of my life, everything worried me, so what's the difference? I learned to do things while being worried and afraid. I had kept some clothes which I could dress for a momentous occasion, but I did not have a good pair of shoes. A wheelbarrow full of plastic containers carrying undesirable scent stood in the way as I crossed the sidewalk. I waited for it to pass, but the man stopped a few meters ahead. He began to unload his materials from the dirty and discolored drum in front of an empty lot. He emanated a disgusting smell. After a long time away from the voice, I heard it again with a soft message. We are going to get you those shoes, no matter what. We have to. We will get them today. I asked myself if I could get them without a job, much less without money. The person who dumped the waste returned to the wheelbarrow when I saw him. I asked him why he was dumping that had such a bad smell. The man himself was filthy and smelly too. He explained that he came from the well in ground, which was very similar to a septic system. He said that he needed cleaning, and observing me, realizing my extreme curiosity, he asked me if I was looking for a job because he had another well to clean up that day. Even though the penetrating smell invaded my entire area, making breathing very difficult, I accepted immediately. The rural and impoverished areas of many countries in South America, Africa, and the Caribbean, inhabitants were forced to seek their resources. There was no drinking water system, but wells that were dug manually were very common instead. Some deep wells were used for informal toilets. Most people would have these types of wells were living in inhumane conditions with a huge degree of environmental contamination around them. We reached the opposite corner, crossing the humble conditioned houses until we reached the well that needed emptying. The man explained to me, "You must enter with a bucket and fill it. Then you give it to me and take it to the wheelbarrow, empty it in the plastic container. Later, while I'm going to unload them, you can go rest for a moment. We will move forward like this until we finish cleaning it." The hole was very narrow, and I thought in its calculating its depth, my body barely had any space to enter. I had to find a way to make it work because I already agreed with the man that needed my shoes badly. The interview could change my life. I had to take the chance and do this. I removed my t-shirt and sandals until I was half naked in shorts. I was ready to start. The penetrating and unmistakable smell invaded my senses. I looked down and I could not believe that I was a step away from incipient mud. In seconds, my body would be bathed in that disgusting waste. The man helped me down slowly. I shrank in my shoulders to enter. There was a thick rope tied to my waist that was in the case of emergencies. I held the bucket with difficulty in one arm. My feet were sinking and I began to feel a strange sensation all over my body and legs until the filthy guanmere reached my chest. I could only breathe through my mouth because the smell was impressively unbearable. The dizziness and the desire to vomit wreaked havoc on me. I was regretting taking this job and I just wanted to run away. When I was about to give up, the voice appeared. "Everything will be fine. The smell test, this is a smell test to know how much you want to change your life. If so, everything will be fine. With those words in mind, I closed my eyes for a few seconds and started as time passed. I didn't even feel the impact of the smell anymore. I gave my work partner the buckets more and more quickly. The man hurried on the pace that I imposed on him. I almost did not rest. In fact, I had to stop a couple of times, wait for him to get back from the wheelbarrow. It was more enough a time to take a breather. I kept working the routine until about 5 in the afternoon, when we finally finished cleaning. The man happily offered my efforts a speed and paid me what he had agreed. The body smelled like a living, rotten meat. The sharp smell walked with me. I hurried to complete the objective, take a shower, and then go in search of shoes. My shower was longer than usual. I had the smell thoroughly soaked into my skin. I was running out of time. I relentlessly tried to work the soap to get rid of the stench. I rushed out of my house. It was getting late. I walked quickly, almost running, to manage to find a shoe store still open. I bought the long-awaited shoes. I felt terrific, positive, like things were finally looking up. I was so proud that I had committed to a dirty job to get to where I want to be. I returned home full of satisfaction. Now the idea was to prepare for what was coming the next day, the interview. I woke up eagerly. The only white shirt I had washed and well ironed, it waited next to my pants with a black tie I had, along with my brand new shoes. I looked quite presentable for the occasion. I was traveling on bus and doubts began to dominate my mind again. I asked myself thousands of questions. I tried to speak with the voice, although at that time I still thought it was part of my imagination. Somehow I still felt it necessarily part of me. The employee entrance was in the back of the building towards the parking lot. I identified myself to the security man, who asked me the person whom I was going to see. The person came looking for me, invited me to enter, and then offered me a seat in an exquisite office. The voice appeared saying, "This is your opportunity. You must believe in yourself. See the things you've wanted to experience at yours. Remove all your doubts and remember that things you think in your mind are what you are creating. If you want to test what I'm saying right now with this job, here's how. If you want to experience getting this job, you will have it. See the experience of the interview as positive. You just have to accept it as real." It repeated those words to me several times, and then I heard my name. The Director of Human Resources, Mr. Ramirez, appeared before me. He received me very kindly, confirming the recommendation to be by my friend, he who initiated this conversation. In the middle of it, he asked me if I spoke the English language. That's when it occurred to me to continue the interview in his language after consultation. The director, after a short talk, seemed convinced. He paused and asked me if I had any other language knowledge. My affirmative answers made him move his head positively. It took the opportunity to mention French and German as well as Italian. I proposed to continue in French. He told me that is the language that he knew very little, but he accepted and we continued. French is a language that I like very much. Along with English, I practice frequently. When I was in Haiti, it helped me to communicate without problems. I listened to the music of Charles Aznavour. I consulted several books. I left an excellent impression on Mr. Ramirez. Although at the moment he offered me the job as security, My greater desire was to have a position where I could demonstrate my skills and develop myself over time. Mr. Ramirez was very pleased with me. He gave me a documentation of the rules that I had passed medical examination and obtained a police record. After a few days, I would warmly welcome myself to my new job. My first day of work in the security department was quite exciting. I toured all the hotel facilities with a colleague who trained me to know the daily routine. The shift was from 3 in the afternoon to 11 at night. I had to highlight impeccable and the elegance of the building in all its areas. I was delighted and grateful for the opportunity I was given. Things were finally starting to look up. 3 months went by without setbacks. I quickly adapted to hotel life, doing a good job. I was sure that in time a new position would be presented to me because I was fluent in several languages. It opened the door to the Department of Telephone Operators. This was a position that I had accepted, and I was looking for a way to continue progressing. Each time I was getting closer to my genuine desire to have a more direct treatment with guests. Despite a very conservative nature, reaching the position allowed me to socialize more openly with daily influx of conversations, both with colleagues and clients, helped me to spread my personality. I learned formal and dedicated communication at this time. I had been working for about 5 months with dedication and permanent will. I was feeling very comfortable and surrounded by an enthusiastic and friendly work team. A new vacancy appeared on the 10th floor. It was a suitable position as executive of butler. Mr. Ramirez, to whom I owe eternal thanks, allowed me to take this position. I had shown interest in the position, and after the interview with the head of the department, I was granted the job that gave me the confidence to continue developing in the world of hospitality. After 2 weeks of training, I started my work as a butler. I adapted very quickly. I had the ability to get involved effectively in every challenge that came my way. It was a constant in my life prior to the position, so that I didn't need much time to learn. I always wanted to challenge myself more. In the following months, I asked to do voluntary internships on my days off. I was allowed to intern in the reception department, which has several divisions. One of them, the buttons department, which requests were made possible thanks to the management support, to which I have special mention. The position included the possibility of obtaining tips, which was extra money and apart from the regular salary. This meant being able to help my home a little more economically. I stayed a whole year between practices and the daily tasks that my job as a butler required. Each time I obtained the necessary experience to conduct guest services with more elements, better control the circumstances, even if they seemed difficult, and maintain a degree of mental tranquility that still allowed me to respect time and needs. After this time one morning in one of my volunteer practices, they offered me another position. It was temporary. Without thinking much, I accepted it because it was the first step in finding an alternative of staying there permanently in the future. This happened soon after. In the beginning of the shift, I worked veritable. I did not have stability in the aspect. However, what caught my attention was the serpent behavior of those who became my companions. That caused me some difficulty This was a time I felt that inside the workplace I had always adapted suitably and worked in harmony. After 4 months, I was able to get the morning shift stable. I started to use my creativity. The hotel had an agreement with rental car agencies, which commissioned people who got customers. Because that sparked my interest, it was the first thing I did. Along with this, I met a person who was in the business, the Habanas, Cuban cigars. They were manufactured in the colonial zone, where the habaneros made the so-called puros manually. One of the clients and one of the merchants from California to acquire them on one of his trips. I gained his trust. He taught me everything about his marketing. From that point on, I was the one in charge of getting orders to the United States. The commission for rent of cars and Cuban cigar business and the tips for my work were added up to my regular salary. I was officially economically stable. This led me to live in spiritual and mental abundance. During all those years, I recap personal satisfaction that helped me maintain that sacrificed effort, humility necessary to continue processing. I was repeatedly chosen as Employee of the Month and twice Employee of the Year. I also received many positive comments from guests for my dedication and conduct in my service. I applied much of what I was able to read daily, my days of solitude and deep meditation. I spent hours instructing myself, feeding on reading. By then, the interaction with the voice was gone again. The moments of harmony I experienced caused me not to lean on the voice any longer. Through my unpleasant memories, generational trauma, lack of employment, lack of resources, and everything that produced anguish, the voice had always been there without exercising that anymore. I became disconnected from it, this time without directly choosing. I was very close to concluding a stage full of learning and satisfaction. My trip to the United States would open a new door. The fond memories of those moments lived at that time I worked at the Sheraton Hotel will always cause rejoicing and nostalgia. The memories shared with my colleagues in each instance of our daily responsibilities are enjoyed again and again. Every time I've had the opportunity to travel to my country, we met to exchange memories. Some have passed away, others have retired. However, the memories are still there, always making us feel good. The experience shared with others who remembered together is a beautiful and emotional connection, makes us live a better environment on this planet. Earth, where there are still many places that suffer from hostility and separation. Through the thoughts of those good feelings and foster communication with other human beings, we create happiness. Beautiful memories remain unblemished and indelicable. Lasting memories produce joy and stillness. They teach us wherever we go, we are good, simple and kind, and staying in the struggle for harmony and peace is the essence of life itself.